주로는 왔다가 응원리시바디 독진 공격권을 독진 장전들이 때로 독요에 때로 덤나야들이 처리제들이 송구성 능력이 생나 용제 기체 보여왜 가시게 아다저라 송들이 봐 잡도도 차도 요리지 문이 지내다다다 이 라만 재미도 송이 지치 모르겠다 좀 이렇게 삼브라서 좀 맞다도 좀 냠디 요리 지치미 봐 저거 차단 찍고 등에 삼로 땅에 비는 바닥 좀 많은 맞다는 것도 많이 같이 말해 자탐지 시리를 삼로 땅 지참지 자와 가리 루이제 좀은 폐바요 말이 고소 약자티 레드 사운드 가리 이 사운드 뉴먼 말이 뉴먼 가서 뉴먼보다 소설한다 들이 거라 잡다는들이 소설 빼 패는도 대 삼로들이 뉴먼 뭐바들이 다다 도그를 내려고 도서도 뉴먼보다 무신은 그래도 들이 상하도 상신랑 가서 소장하선 소탈라 니발은 지금도 상신을 때려 삼hin지게 다 도고도 상하를 때니 동문이 니몽고 랑지시 니몽도 빵고고면도 뒤에서 소장하서 남가들 랑상랑상 뒤에서는 이 남자 저거들이 때다지 송송도 상원소리 정도 받에 뒤에 하고는 양철용은 또 동해에 마시는 빠도 올라오고 말이 그래서 다 무슨 답을 다른 연구요래 용님만 보요래 저거 맞대 미랑 무슨 연구는 보요래 같이 살렸다가 돼요래 플라이 되지 당지 요래 가시를 되니다 로바들이 되지 요는 가시를 냐와는지 연구요래 그래서 금방서 잡아가 쏘바다 동안 촉바 좁아 그래서 매상 쳤대라도 말이 여기 찍고 연구요는 성순지동에 당시 성우들 가래 다다도를 내라고 요만이 어느 몇십 명을 송도 때로는 저 갖고 오지 우리도 성우들을 똑같이 산지에 송우들이 저래서 옹송 저서 가래 저서 유모발이 유모가 유모다 나주라도 성우다 이 유모가 같이 깨를 납상하고 그래 이 하고 나 찾았지 다다들이 랑게 상신의 상하리가 상신기 들어와지 상하를 희바송 그때서 유몽그람지 시그니 차디요리 유몽도 시니 카카리오 말이 벨벨 세상 따로는 세상 벨롱 따로시 저 초안 양선 용선 가다 이거 들이다 상하가 탈람된 초도 잡아서 쌈을 못 잡아 리도 대매는 은행이 송 소리도 무슨 용고도 라기 시다 용고도 없어 그 말을 배송만하지 이 성우들 때는 용도 없어 이 하고서는 드리고 방주로 방주들이 달래라고 방들 시선들이 뭐든 장도도 대면에서 심지 탐지 사진이 왜 사람들이 송 가래송로 토밤에 봐 대소매 봐 저리 직제에서 봐 차용을 요래 대차고 가르들이 랑거도 봐아 대서 딱딱 대소매 봐 용거요래 지금 옷들이 송송 따들이 연결해 사람들로 요래 다들 대소로래 되게 대발에 갈래 편거리데 대담들 통도들이 며칠들 편하고 요래 디지털로 싸움으로는 쭈르시 받지 다다 생각 남이 개발가래 유모라 토를 내발가래 유모가 이시 독세 독들은 변냐면 개발가래 대다다 제말에 비해서 고만 영상 제와 기체성 다 하고리 망보요래 야 고만 영상은 대신에 대서 공부를 대서 공부 고만 영상이 쫄랑 것 같으니 다 사용 거요래 공단이 몸에 받쳐다 시행들 하지 그래서 다다 네 돈이 이제 싼는 세발라 사람들을 마음에서랑 얘는 사람을 시면 보여야지 들 남다 데가 남다티 메시 설용아 있어 줄람을 되가지고 랑랑랑 소소라는 따고 파지는 마다 이로 따라 중절장 통거리 영진 통거 말이 그랑이 중을 되지 중지는 통거리 라는 거 세우고 냐면 때에 그래서 다 소당가 상가도 상주를 탈람대로 상보고 가서 땅에 냐면 제공도 냐면 제도 내절 기분이 미소절이야 너희만 보죠 너희만 보죠 샤를 쌈로 나도 보죠 샤를 쌈로만 보죠 너희만 보죠고요 건절절 직장매리 동동을 해야 돼 너희 삼지 좀 왔다 그래서 하고서 봐 나와 사기를 사지 동해 매번 대화 재밀람지 그런 초기 대화 저는 초기 대화 가와요래 라고 세고 돌아오래 이게 쌀도 봐 많이 마음이 유리지방 많이 뒤에 똑고 참라들이 다다 남들이 뭐 강인이들 막 보송 거요래 들들이 다다 오하고도지 대봐요 냠니 탐지가 대화 들 톡대요래 동시바 가다 남니 탐지 대화 톡대요래 동마시 다 제다 가래나 반 잠temtem라고 차로 요래 대서 섬로 딴 거래
So Dharma friends, before we spoke about this Dzogchen practice of purifying the seeds of the 6 realms of samsara. And so we have said that for that practice to become really authentic, we have to bring the suffering of the 3 realms to mind, meaning that it has to become a conscious experience that comes to you. Otherwise, I know some people maybe just go to like the mountains and meditate there, but actually, what it really comes down to is not this like physical seclusion, but we actually need to gain a conscious experience of it. And so, for example, my guru Chima Doje gave me this instruction, which is very important, which comes from this previous quote by Jigten Sumgen. Cause and effect is the natural manifestation of one's moment-to-moment thoughts. So what he said is that you need to apply whenever you encounter a being. So now humans and animals coexist. So we can really see their suffering, the suffering of animals, for example. We can see the suffering of hunger and thirst and heat and cold. But then when you look at an ant, for example, what do the ants do and what do people do? Actually, it's exactly the same thing. But then if you only want to protect, give refuge to their body, that alone will not benefit them, because they all have these karmic seeds in their mind. So what are these karmic seeds? They are the afflictive emotions. And where are they? You can find them in your own mind. So when you understand that, then that actually will eventually benefit them. So now when we have a way to understand that in this life, it actually can become very easy. We can easily let go and abandon these afflictions, if we just recognize them, it is actually enough. So we have said there's these 3 levels of the path. In the Pratimoksha, we abandon. In the Bodhisattva path, we transform, and in the Vajrayana path, we realize. So in the Pratimoksha path, we abandon them, the afflictive emotions, based on fear. And in the Bodhisattva path, they become purified or transformed through love and compassion. And in the Vajrayana path, we realize, we know that the true nature of these afflictions is actually primordial wisdom, and therefore there is no need to abandon them. So now you are able to immediately remember the instructions of those 3 levels of the path and practice them. And if you just practice in a single session, then you can actually purify these seeds of the 3 lower realms. And so in order to be able to do that, you need to understand that these seeds are by nature suffering. You need to experience that suffering. Because if you do not really understand suffering, then you will not really develop a wish to abandon these karmic seeds. So now, for example, many people in this world have an experience of suffering. And humans and animals alike experience much suffering in this world. At the same time, there are some people who experience only happiness and bliss, like in the God realm. And then there is some who, even though they live in a country that's really well off, they still experience hell there. So some people, for example, they are robbed, or they are abused and beaten, or they experience hunger and cold or harm by the elements and fire and water and so on. So whatever experience they endure, the suffering feeling is the same. And so then we think about the suffering, especially of the 3 lower realms. How is that suffering? And so then what is the seed of that suffering? So right now, actually, we can understand it quite easily. But of course, we need to experience it. If we just say that there is these, there's these seeds of suffering, and that leads to this suffering and so on, then people, it will be difficult for people really to develop faith in just that. But so we need to really experience it ourselves. So the Buddha said that the cause of suffering are the afflictive emotions. So okay, then where are they? They are in my own mind. And when you find them in your own mind, then you gain an experience. And then you think about the methods of the Bodhisattva vehicle and the Vajrayana vehicle of transformation and of realization. And then by really experiencing it and looking at them, the afflictions, you realize that the afflictions actually are really by nature primordial wisdom. The afflictions and wisdom are not separate. For example, we say that therefore anger is mirror-like wisdom. But you realize that when you have a direct experience of it, then you realize that the methods of the Vajrayana, the secret mantra, are really incredible, are really most supreme. If not, then you might have some vague understanding, but you will not develop a real wish to abandon these karmic seeds. If you really understand this point in your experience, then you know that anyone who has these karmic seeds, self or other, will have to experience the suffering in the 3 lower realms in actuality. So that is also what Milarepa had said. So through these seeds, depending on these karmic seeds in our mind, we experience suffering. And so we need to, Milarepa, what he said is that we need to understand, but then also we need to experience it in a direct experience. And only through feeling it, you will have a wish to abandon it. And then it becomes quite easy, actually. Otherwise, it's not easy. If you just give it up, it's not so easy. But once you really understand it, you will want to give it up, and you will engage in the practices to abandon them or to transform them or to realize their nature. So then you realize that Buddhas and sentient beings are inseparable. Otherwise it's hard to understand, and you will think that the Buddhas are real and sentient beings are real. And so in this way, through your personal experience, you will develop real trust in the words that you heard in the teachings. Otherwise, it is hard to clear away the obscurations, and doubts will always arise within the mind, and you will think that, oh, this is what he said, and it's probably what it is, probably true. But there's still some doubt in the mind if you think that way. And still, there is also faith. Although there is doubt, there's also faith, and that faith will slowly benefit, but it will just be harder to gain realization in this very lifetime for as long as these doubts are in the mind, and these doubts will be in the mind for as long as it all remains a conceptual understanding that is not based on an actual experience. So to gain the actual experience, you must be diligent in practice. So when you practice, the afflictive emotions and their suffering must actually arise within your mind. So they must come to you. And then you oppose them with awareness. You practice with them. So Milarepa said that it is important that one's meditation, the practice, becomes imbued with experience. There are a lot of people who have understood the view, who know the view, but there are not so many who actually have experienced it through personal, direct experience. And the way meditation or practice is experienced is actually in our day-to-day activities. So it is said that there are signs. It is said, for example, a sign of learning or hearing is a peaceful and subdued behavior, and a sign of meditation practice is an absence of afflictive emotions. So also Milarepa had said, as you mentioned before, this progression, when we speak about the progression through the bhumis and the paths, these levels are just an increasing clarity in one's realization of emptiness. So there are many people who know how to speak about the different levels of the bhumis and the paths, but in terms of having actually gained a realization, also Milarepa said there are certain indications and signs, as we previously mentioned. So the practice must be applied in one's day-to-day activity, and so you have to see for yourself in your daily life what is the state of your body and your activities and your mind. So don't look at what other people are doing. If you concern yourself with what other people are doing, all you will see is just faults and not qualities. And that is because it is seen through the lenses of your own afflicted mind. So rather you should look at yourself, at how you are doing with your practice, where you're at with your practice, how you're applying the methods of the Pratimoksha, Bodhisattva, and the Vajrayana, and how you're actually gaining a true experience of it. So when you actually experience it, then the experience that you gain through meditation is that, so there's so much suffering all the time, and you're constantly in a kind of state of misery. But when you begin to practice, what you realize is that all these, what causes all the sufferings, all the thinking in the mind, it is when I think so much, when there are so many thoughts in my mind, that's when I suffer. When I meditate, then I do not suffer, because that's when there are not so many thoughts in the mind. And then through this experience, you realize that suffering is actually just like an illusion. It is just whatever I think in my mind. And then within that state, you find the path to great bliss, great happiness that is free of all suffering. That is the supreme bliss. And where do you find that? Within your own mind. You cannot find it anywhere else. And it's also nothing that you find anew. It is acquire anew. It is already present in your mind. So the different methods of the path are taught in order to realize that. And so therefore also the Omahung Vajra recitation practice is in order to realize that, and it really constitutes the heart essence of all practice. That is, if you know the significance behind it, then it really becomes the heart essence of all practice. So in this way, you have to, with this understanding of understanding its significance, you have to enter the practice, and then you will really want to engage in practice.
다 상지선진이 용말에서 연양간에 다다다 내가 마도버가리들이 요래지 마도버가리들이 죽었랑 갔다베들이 롱가 자송다베 대대다 죽었다 롱고 타고 차라 대대사제다 선압 도요래 사탑세가 투게서는 삼도 온과 아마 혼정정들이 정업성들이 올가를 정말 지지 랑나탐 대도 모르들이 송상 담지들이 홍제들이 톡톡처럼 양발이 좋아야 들이 송을 뒤송내서 강해지는 다다 자와 담지 싫어도 즉시 받았다면서 냠미지 냠미지 다다다라게 담고 냠미지 와서 시시바데 강해들 뒤섭지 상제 담지 상제들이 낙과감나 탐로를 죽을로도 상계해야지. 이런 것이 파실것이 낙과감나 탐로를 낙과다냐면요. 들리제 탐소는 이제 가래 들리제를 롱걸 저쪽을 정걸 뜻은 홍가래야 되는. 이 당고 상처저 특기 들이 사실 상계의 영리도데 심기제도 상계 타바사 상태 모람들이 심기니 변발쇼데. 이 심기 가래야 되는. 늘게 뭐 요제서 마다 추니서도 말이 니디는 들이 내가 처럼다고 차서 뒤 탐제들 좀 쓰다들이다 롱거들 쪼거서 롱거들 죽어지 답고차 쪼거들 다 받아 이거 냠들이 차차래요 그리고서 냠이 집어서 쪼거인데 다음서 이제 내 생이 뭔가 요장은 같다 로고 니디지 요래 나게 니디지 선데 요래 저는 니디 요게 되게 해서 뒤박 차들이 다음으로 동의 용어도 대대로 들고 답답 सब지도 유대로 인 이거 들이 사지 탐지설라들이 다 온과 아마 항상 왕자 되게 가면들이 사지 탐지설라데 저 동의요래들이 들이 사지 탐지설라 오병어들 사지를 얘기도 다 가자야 엄마들이 옛날에 사지 탐지설라 뜻에도 이 엄마들이 옹을 사지 탐지 거도지라는 인성 그 도제시 바데 사지 죽었을 버절매 봐 계셔매 봐 그렇게 나파는 냠지 요래 때 거도지라니 그때 옹집을 그때 대다들이라게 르자지 담나도 자손도 차송사 중가리데 나오셔버 르등내리 sabte 늦었대 진짜 밤에 봤을 낭 동지 낭 때문에 다 이가 세게 낭탐지 못 보세 달리 좀 떠올록대 거기 냠냠그서 떠올록을 선우 적디 장위가 하는데 이제 좀 더치 참이 거기서 팝차래 그걸 찾아라 당연히 적디 감 도도를 진짜 내가 말이 세트가 타고 말이다 적디 가는 거니 좀더 매주 좀 더 매래지 주진이 시험도 못 사치로 저는 좀데 토로를 타로 매도 게 토로를 매서 다주 좀내지 참 이거는 제 초的些嘛人家你还有嘛当年人家没个么东西但就把这么的上车的当不成托着一样的是的当地把差的公司的熬那么的走的有的这个三分之八的送完了这三分之八的送完了这个三分之八了大这里我们的当当的呢这里知道这里看当的呢都能没话哈讲了那我的我们的那我的蓝这里 선생님들이 자예강 줬어. 자예강이 말 가지네. 자소다 그래지. 홍지야 요봐. 니야 왜 봐. 자소다 그래지. 지동하 공지. 문에에서 이제 봤다 이셔고 거리들이. 누바도 문에에 말에서 비tin데 누바들이. 그 아들들 자타고 쉽게 다시 그래 봐서. 이 다시 그 요리 연구 요리 찍기라. 사실 삼지서 온가라만 삼지 같이 연구 요리. 얘들 자티게 동가래. 자타 동지. 자들은 진짜 내가 먼저 싸면 딱 했다가 진짜 요만 자가 성질 기타 했다 차례 요만 돈을 가려 또 많이 또 답을 알아들이서 또 많이 돈 아니기 시작해 요래. 다다 시지게 거기 또 받는 시지 또 받는 속을 때 레sla고 요래. 그때 대치 답을 거지. 사제 탐제 답을 롱거 쭉 이안을 가는데 쭉 다치 부분 독상 거지. 롱거 들들이 되다. 자총답 것을 그게 대치 답을 거거든. 요데 뚜바들 요데 요데 진짜 매대 남지 요데 어따들 뚜바다 타와 파 야야를 다사 그 요리 썰 자총답을 요리 그래 그게 대치 답을 거지. 랑지 니스 매be 송지 라상지 가리 지금 뭐 랑지들 딱 제다면 이 남정 동화 차대요만 그 나린데 내말 요지요만 그 랑지지 그 자총답을 대치 랑지 세장 거래. 나 동거 작동들 자지 자동지 디지털 봐. 이 dem반지 다른 거 책임보들 수약보도 업에 가려요. 책도 봐도 남산 고소란 거 이제 자동지 디지털 봐. 장자가 자동지 디지털 봐. 자지 무서운데 디테일은 좀 봐야 되니 책도 그래. 가르치는 또배 가발만 저렇게 매비 가발만 저와 랑이 용티 렉네 봐 찌었다면 지니 인성 사실 세상서 말에 내로 하고서 또 같이는 가야 지요 말이지 매받지는 뭐가 지요 말이지 제일 랑이 용티를 내 봐라 따봉하는 데는 다른 집 하면 sem이 유무 복잡하고요 말이지 다른 집 하면 자동으로 뒤져서 받아서 직디 감지 쏘바탐지 다고 세군지 봐라 들이 봐도 자인지 봐라 들이 다음으로 들리려고 다 줘봤다 아무리 뺏어서 중성지 대다 저바로 중성지다 그래 저바면 용띠 대다 다들 그 님이 가르쳐 된 거를 보지서 말을 비우나 다들 나를 줬다 봐요 니다 니 집을 잘한 거 작동성도 찍다 상놈하다 봐야죠 요거 나가를 찾아가 또 봐요 말 대답을 또 다시는 뒤때는 거지 난 처음 가르치 작동을 해서 sem 땡에 말고가 내 저거요 그래 스랍디 저마미가 차음을 사람 말을 다 듣는 저마 차음을 저바든 저바래 저바 맞으나 저건 저바면 나동하래 다른 저바면 나동하래 대답을 유보들이 여기 알나 봐 자탐지 사제탐지 송동방들이 알나 봐들이 아지 이 고상 누구들 알았대 또뭐 알 고민들이 아들 탐송서 또 뭐는 제가 다른 제가 요래 대답을 때문에 제가 가래 다른 밤에 차고 요래 이 홍대롱 살았던 거니 은혜스롱 살았던 걸롱 세가대 살았던 걸롱 은혜스 홍을 탐주고 요래 홍을 탐들 홍대 탐나는 롱보면 안 나갈 정도고 요래 홍대들이 다다 롱버지송한테 롱 야성 때고 공공창한테 롱보면 홍대 탐송사는 홍도 사용한테 말해 배고 파선 종가 말때 따와서는 홍오와 홍도 동다야 때 그리더라다 다 사지 탐지고 리바데 가리 따따따지 저바 매바도 상제래지 저바지는 고아래지 저바 용을 때때지 사제서는 다 저바 총송을 했으리 다 사제서 합대래지 사제 뒤숨지 사제 탐정 고성토 오마홍송은 거 알아야지 대해서는 내가 그리 대답했지 저거 이제 롱거다 저거 탐지랬더니 저거를 잡아서더니 고성톡도 대서 답을 고성톡들라 들이 용띠는 잘해야지 용디 제다고 또 산지 용디 잡차만 뭐 따땡이 되리 요래 트레가리 십지 삼지 대다 마도버 점지된 코알을 dorto고 요래 코알을 늘가리고 십지 삼지 차로도 저 잡지쳐도 뜨고 차타고 요래 용디는 트레 되지 않았더니 거송토 용디 트레데 산지 거송토 용디 트레 나이다니 갑자기 레레를 강강아 파출들이 레레를 강강아 들이 사제 동서만 어때 참을 저들 사제 담지 거동도 요즘 제가 나는데 대양 홍 쓰는데 대양 홍 죽을는데 저홍 죽어서 광서 홍들들이 다다다 탑자다 자와데 배놓고 다 우마를 그때나 바로 롱동서 꽉을 때나 바로 명아 들이 원다와 사도 라서 남들은 봐 제발 살아는 것을 봐 때다는 타타고 들는 제베들이 양 다다다 동남고 된바 있으면 이시지 그 말아야 돼 남심만 통이시 통데 남심이라는 다진이도 될 좋아 돼도 내가 박사도 이시들 남파를 줘서들이 말아야 밖에 송 공거식을 가서 송 말이 다 호속도 고말해 호 시로에 just 시마로라고 열었어 호 누가 안 가도 줄이지 뉴질랜드 시골이 초발해야지. 내 시험을 가르쳐고 그 누군가를 참으라고 시험해야지. 그래서 가지고나 코요. 말하면 나서는 롱을 비차만 보시 가시고 말은 남탄한테 말하면 주려고 말했지. 돈다고 내 말했지. 그 강은 조금에 강은 되게 누군가가 참대요. 서게 쏘았다는 코요. 이거는 대바제들 말하려봐. 라마나서 예미 되는데 동도도 설이여 동도도 말해 나는 생각 내로도서 내로 등에 내로 파참도 맞아 죽을 상제되는 내 마음에 받아서다 남자 동로 그래서 소냐면 제가면 이제 받직당 매서 가야리 로요래 하다 내와치 모여라니 때문에 이 대화 될때다 들이다 초가 대화서
So when we practice the Vajra recitation with the wind energies, so there's first one way to practice to receive the blessings of all the Buddhas, and so through receiving the blessings, that purifies the obscurations in our mind. So we gather and we summon all the blessings of the Buddha's enlightened body, speech, and mind. So when you engage in practice, first, so the Buddhas, how we receive their blessings is that the Buddhas are the ones who have realized that Buddhas and sentient beings are inseparable, but just temporarily, sentient beings have not realized that. But ultimately, the true nature is Dharmakaya. Dharmakaya is like space. So then from the Dharmakaya, which is like space, arises the rainbow like Sambhogakaya. The Dharmakaya and Sambhogakaya are the pure aspects of the mind. So it is these blessings that we gather when we, for example, also gather the blessings of the deities. So we gather them in the form of white Om, red A, and blue Hong. When you inhale, on the inhalation, think that the essence of all the Buddha's enlightened body in the form of white Om has dissolved into you. You're taking in their blessings. And then when you think then think that the blessings of the enlightened speech has all been summoned. And then with Hung, the blessings of their enlightened mind remain within you, which is the blessing of the meditative state, the awakened mind. And so, as we said, ultimately, within the expanse of primordial wisdom, all the Buddhas are one. So, now, the various practices that we engage in, such as the Yidam deity practice and so on, the purpose of these practices is to realize that the enlightened body, speech, and mind of all the Buddhas. So when the Buddhas attain enlightenment, it is said when one attains enlightenment, they dissolve into the space expanse of the Dharmakaya. And so it is said one becomes one with space. And so that is what we need to realize, the space-like nature of the mind. And space is always with us, so space is everywhere. So therefore, when they dissolve, they are together with us wherever there is space. So then, from that space appear the Sambhogakayas and the Nirmanakayas. So how do these arise? Why do the Sambhogakayas and Nirmanakayas arise? It is because whenever a Buddha cultivates the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, they think only of sentient beings, of benefiting sentient beings. And from that aspiration arise those Sambhogakayas and Nirmanakayas. So what is that sentient being? Sentient beings also possess Buddha nature. They possess Dharmakaya, but because temporarily they perceive a dualistic existence, their mind has become like ice. And the Sambhogakayas and Nirmanakayas appear to melt this ice. So the Dharmakaya and Sambhogakaya are the pure aspects. And then, for example, we as the practitioners, we are Nirmanakayas, meaning that although we possess Buddha nature, temporarily it is obscured by our dualistic perception. We think that there is self and other. And because of that, we accumulate karma. And because of that, we create karmic imprints, habitual patterns in the mind, as a result of which we experience suffering. When we separate from these, then we really have the same essence. So this is why we take in the blessings of the Buddha's enlightened body, speech, and mind in the form of white Om, red An, blue Hong. So we are gathering their essence. And so when we think about all the Buddhas of the 3 times, of course we cannot count all of these Buddhas. There's so many. So therefore we gather them into their essence. So the essence of all the Buddha's enlightened body gathers in the syllable Om. So Om, the nature of Om is the Vajra body. So Vajra, because the Dharmakaya of a Buddha is unchanging, without birth and without death, and pervading all of space. The Om represents the Vajra body, this Vajra, unchanging Vajra body of all the Buddhas. And it means that even though form appears like a rainbow in the sky, it is empty of self-nature. All appearances are empty, all forms are empty. And so the fault, the mistake that we make is believing that these things are real. We think that I am this body, this is what I am. And that thought itself is what we call the obscuration. That's the obscuration. So actually all form is empty, all appearance is empty. Self and other and all outer objects, all appearances are empty. So through the Om, you experience the empty nature of all appearance. And then the entire universe. The universe is endless, but all it is a compounded phenomenon consisting of little particles, of the smallest particles, and that can be infinitely dissected. So ultimately, it is nothing but a pile of ashes that lacks any true existence at all. So even if you were trying to find this solid world, there's no one who will actually come up with anything to show. There is no solid world to be found. For example, if you just read the Heart Sutra one time, you can really understand that how everything does not inherently exist, how everything will turn into ashes in the end. One's own body, the entire universe, or like a flower withering. So if you understand that there is nothing to be found, you will not cling, and that is enough. If you don't cling to the true existence of appearances. And so you don't cling to it because you can't find anything to grasp at. And if you can't find anything to grasp at, you will see that everything is like an illusion. So this is how the fixation to a real existence first becomes shattered. But then still, because of these karmic imprints in the mind, we still perceive our bodies to be the me. And that is also because of habituated to grasping that we have in our mind. So the dispels this grasping. Through the we realize that ultimately no appearance in this world, no form truly exists inherently. All appearances are empty of self-nature. And therefore, seeing it in this way, the entire universe becomes a boundless palace, a palace of the deity, which is just like a rainbow in the sky. You can see it, but you cannot grasp it. So this is what you should understand through the And when you really understand that, then all fixation to a reality will collapse. So what we call this fixation is basically our thought of thinking that's real or that's not real. So that's the and then the when the it comes in through the inhalation with at the navel, the represents, the red represents the enlightened speech of all the Buddhas, so the blessings of which you take in. So regarding the speech, we speak to each other, we communicate with each other, we listen to each other. For example, we listen to the teachings of the Buddha or the teachings of a Lama and so on. So, but what is the real nature of all these words that we hear? The true nature of words is empty. You also can't find them, those words. They do not exist in reality. If you really think about it, if you really analyze it, where really are these words? They are said now, and the next moment they're already gone. They don't really exist. They're actually empty. So this is how you realize the empty nature of sound. This is also, for example, explained in the praise, when we praise Yamantaka's form and speech, that explains it actually very clearly. It says, your pure form of great bliss is without conceptual elaboration, the unelaborated great bliss form. So that is the form of the Sambhogakaya and also Nirmanakaya. So the Nirmanakaya is the form that actually appears to us. The Sambhogakaya is like a rainbow-like form. That Sambhogakaya form is the great bliss form that is unelaborated. So it is there, we can see it, but we cannot grasp it. It is there, but lacks inherent existence. And even though it doesn't really exist, it still appears. So that is this form that is free from elaboration, the unelaborated form. So such a form, when it appears, just let it appear as it appears, like a rainbow in the sky. And so that is the nature of the Sambhogakaya. So in the Yamantaka text also it says the naturally non-dual form. So that is that form of Sambhogakaya, the form of the deity. When you really look into the nature, the essence of the deity's form, you see it is clearly appearing, yet completely empty of self-nature. So the in form appears like a rainbow in the sky. So that is the form. And regarding the speech, the sound is also empty, which is represented by the And so that purifies the thoughts of, the grasping thoughts of conflating one's own ideas or thoughts with the actual object. So, for example, what that means is we believe in the truth of what we hear. For example, when somebody says, you are great, you're wonderful, then you're immediately very happy about that. But if somebody insults you, immediately you get very angry. So that is the thought that grasps at or conflates the object with the inner thought or the idea about it. So actually, when there is no grasping at sound, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, then all sound becomes mantra, all sound becomes pure or empty. The grasping at sound collapses. When you understand that sound does not actually inherently exist. For example, in the Shagya Pandita's words of excellent advice, it says that do not be pleased when being praised, and do not feel sad when being blamed. But look at your own, a sensible person would look at the characteristics or the qualities within oneself, whether other people blame one or not. Look at the characteristic of the word that is being that you have heard. So such a person, when a sensible person, when they understand that, will not feel joyful when being praised or upset when being blamed, but will continue to remain in the natural state, remaining within the view. So when there is no grasping at sound, then no imprint is created. And then all sound becomes empty. It all becomes the same. But it is because, in this world, people grasp at the sounds, at whatever they hear, they interpret sounds in their ways, that people are in conflict with each other. And it begins with hearing the sound. So first of all, we believe that the other person is real, and then we believe that what they say is what they really said. We interpret it our way, and then grasping at it in a certain way, we begin to fight with each other. So we can see the fault that comes from fixating on the thoughts in our mind, and also the qualities that come from not fixating. So whether other people praise you or blame you, it all actually is the same. There's also a teaching by Guru Rinpoche in the supplication in 7 chapters, where he teaches, we supplicate, is a supplication that shows the taking the appearances, sounds, and thoughts as the path, practicing with them. So in there it says that when various appearances manifest, so when things manifest, just let them be. And likewise, when sounds manifest, just let them be without developing thoughts. Then they are just empty display, illusory display. Sound is empty of self-nature. When you just continue to abide within a state of meditation, within a state of samadhi. So then, when there is no grasping in the mind, that is really the blessing. The blessing is when grasping is cleared away. That is when you have received the blessing. So, for example, when there is no grasping at form, then all appearance becomes empty, and all empty appearance is the deity. When there is no grasping at sound, sound becomes empty, and all sound is mantra. So that is the syllable A. It represents the enlightened speech, the empty enlightened speech of all the Buddhas of the 3 times. And so for the visualization, it is related to the Tumu practice of the channels, winds, and drops practices, where you visualize the arm at the navel. So you think that the blessings of enlightened speech have all dissolved into that arm, and all fixation to sound has disappeared, has dissolved. And then for the Hung, on the exhalation, we think Hung, but actually we're not really exhaling the entire Hung, but we are only exhaling half part of the Hung is the wind. So half of the wind, the stale wind. The actual essence of the wind of the Hung actually stays melted into the Hung at the navel too. And so then the actual essence of the wind stays there. And in this way, you are retaining the quintessence of the airs. It is that the retaining of the airs is the vase breath of the Tumo practice, where the lower winds are drawn up and the upper winds are pressed down, which forms a receptacle, or like a kind of closed sphere at the navel area. And so in there, when you exhale, think the essence of wind dissolves into this sphere and is not actually expelled. And ultimately, it can't really be expelled because ultimately its ultimate essence transcends coming and going. So that is the essence of the Ahong, representing the power of all the Buddha's enlightened body, speech, and mind. And so, in brief, when there is no grasping in the mind, that is the Buddha's mind. When there is grasping, that is a samsaric state. When grasping becomes purified, that is the blessing of the Buddhas. And the Buddhas of the 3 times enlightened body, speech, and mind gather in the syllables Om Ahong. The 2 Rupakaya, or form emanations, are the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya. And now from our perspective, in particular, the Nirmanakaya. And these represent the purified, enlightened body, speech, and mind. And then there's also the enlightened activities and qualities. So regarding the enlightened qualities, for example, Buddha possesses the qualities of hundreds of different kinds of samadhi and so on. Regarding the enlightened activities, the Buddhas appear to liberate sentient beings from samsara, those beings who have not realized this. And how are they liberated? It is by melting the ice block so that they can become one with the ocean. So the Buddhas do that with their enlightened activities. So every Buddha possesses these 5 attributes of enlightened body, speech, mind, activities, and qualities. All the Buddhas embody these. And then each of these 5 can be combined with each other, so there's different variations. And that is how thousands and infinite different Buddha emanations appear. But when they're all gathered into their essence, they come down to those 5 attributes. And then these are further summarized into 3, the body, speech, and mind, which is represented by the Om Ahong. And then the Om Ahong itself also is further condensed into just the Hung. Everything gathers just into the Hung syllable. And therefore we meditate just on the Hung syllable, because it represents the ultimate nature of the mind, which is clear and empty and free from all extremes. For example, this is how it is also explained in the Madhyamaka school, the middle way school, from the perspective of the scriptures and logical reasoning. It is free from the extremes. And also it is explained in the paths of Mahamudra and Dzogchen, where we approach it from an ultimate perspective, the ultimate truth of non-dual primordial wisdom. Whereas Milarepa had said, I do not see consciousness, I see primordial wisdom. Consciousness here means that it refers to the mind that perceives a duality, a mind of self and other, a mind that experiences happiness and suffering, a mind that is filled with karmic imprints. So that is the ordinary consciousness. Then the primordial wisdom is just like space. It has been there since beginningless time and is all-knowing, therefore it's wisdom. So regarding that, Milarepa gave a last instruction just before he passed away. And he said that it is just the body that needs to go. The body has to die. So you're asking me not to die, but this body consists of 5 elements. And whatever consists of 5 elements is bound to disintegrate. And so the body must die, but the mind continues to remain. I can never die. Wherever the 5 elements are, my mind will continue to pervade. The mind will always be there. And so that is really his Dharmakaya nature. So he said that whoever supplicates me, whoever calls upon me, I will always be there with them. So we can find the story in Milarepa's life story. And that's really all we need. It's not even necessary to study all of these different scriptures and books and so on, and from logical reasoning and so on. It is just like Milarepa had said. Milarepa wouldn't lie. His words are truthful. They are the ultimate truth. And what he said is that I really cannot die. I will continue to pervade the 5 elements, and whoever supplicates me, I will be right with them. And he could say that because he had realized that his mind, the Guru's mind, the disciples' mind, are all indivisible. We are not separate. So this is what a Buddha realizes. So to realize that, don't try to understand the outer world and all the various phenomena, but look at your own mind. When you look at your own mind and realize it, then it will go out, so to speak, and pervade everything naturally. And that is attaining enlightenment in the Dharmakaya. So when you practice without a single thought in the mind, and the mind becomes very, very clear, you experience great bliss. This experience of great bliss that comes from practice arises naturally. And the bliss that arises from practice, the bliss that is your innate bliss, your true nature, that is said to be the supreme bliss.
상지 좀 되게 생기 남 상계이세 도로도 상계를 좀 통특고 말해서만 그냥 도로들 대신 좀 보여래 대신 좀 보여래 아 우리가 로버를 좀 해서 도로때 동네 와대 로버를 좀 말이지 나라나 동네도 왜 동네도 어떤나 로버를 좀 해서 로버를 좀 하더래 이 로버를 좀 하더 가려랬다 나와냐 만들래 So
also in relation to the Vajra recitation, actually, now in a more relative sense, actually when we cultivate compassion for animals, for example, in a temporary sense, it's actually extremely beneficial also for this practice. So how should we reflect when we look at an animal, for example? We see there's suffering. But then the Buddha also said all sentient beings are actually Buddhas. So then when I tell you all animals is actually, this animal is a Buddha, then no one can see that this animal is a Buddha. But if you ask, does this animal possess Buddha nature? And the answer is yes, of course. But the Buddha said, although all beings are Buddhas, they are obscured by adventitious stains. So the suffering of that animals is this adventitious stain. So temporarily they suffer. And then you think that I suffer too. I suffer from this and that. And that's also this temporary adventitious stain. The suffering arises from the adventitious stain. It arises from the obscuration. So this adventitious stain, the obscuration, is this thinking that an I exist. And so that's a very important thing to reflect on over and over again. So today I will stop the teachings here. Dharma friends, Amma Hong.
로를 좀 가려리 다래지 다리 총을 탑 가려지 다 총거리다 어때 이진피로 삼바던 경제가 또 온 거오 탐지는 다다 지주가래 다 사마체미래 사마체미 죽고더니 냠들이 더봐 자는들이 야고요 그랬지.
So what is this adventitious stain? It is the self. And what can we do to eliminate this stain? No, we always say, cultivate an altruistic mind. You destroy this stain if you cultivate love and compassion. So when you realize that, and you find that actually this is the most precious thing. Love, immeasurable love, is the most important practice. Therefore, if you are able to just practice immeasurable love, it is actually enough.
We'll complete the session with long life prayers in the Yellow Prayer Book on page 22. For this realm encircled by snow-covered mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. Tenzin Gyatso, Lord Chenrezig, may you remain steadfast until the end of samsara. Embodiment of the three jewels, great being who upholds and increases the teachings of the Shakya lion, supreme are your activities of guiding others with your perfect deeds. May you, the precious Guru, who accomplishes everything spontaneously, live long. Holder of the teachings of the Lord Drigumpa, great Lord of the three jewels, through the power of your peerless compassion and the holy Dharma's peace and light, you bring relief to beings. May your life be long. The one known in the noble land as Arya Deva emanated into the Gar clan of eastern Tibet as Jodingpa, the heart son of Jigten Gompo. May the life of the glorious Garchen remain steadfast for 100 eons. Page 28. May the teachings of the great Drigumpa Ratna Shri, Master of Interdependence, Omniscient Lord of Dharma, who has seen all knowable things, be upheld until the end of psychic existence through study, practice, hearing, contemplation, and meditation. Your 1,000 arms are 1,000 wheel-turning kings. Your 1,000 eyes are the 1,000 Buddhas of this fortunate eon. Your love is boundless like space. I supplicate to the Bodhisattva Chenrezig.
Long life to everyone following on the live stream.